Breaking news today: Russia and China are becoming clearly visible to Israel at last. A lot of things can be made clearer and current alliances can be rearranged in significant ways during a war. This is the case with Israel's perceptions of Russia and China, which are currently being rethought due to the country's ongoing war with the terrorist group Hamas. Consider Israel's stance toward China, which consisted primarily of trying to increase the PRC's economic influence in the so-called startup nation. Initiated over a decade ago by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, that open-door policy has certainly strained relations with Washington. Successive administrations have urged Jerusalem to be more cautious in its approach to the political and national security risks linked to Chinese funding. These pleadings have yielded a result. Israel has taken measures such as establishing a government financial screening body and increasing scrutiny of foreign investment from the PRC in response to concerns raised by the U.S. In response, China has reduced its financial investment in the Jewish state. Consequently, according to an Israeli expert, the honeymoon between Israel and China has ended. Still, Israel is keen to gain Beijing's favor and has maintained a keen interest in Chinese engagement. For reasons of practicality, this is the case. According to an observer I spoke with in Tel Aviv earlier this year, Israel must carefully manage its relationship with China. Otherwise, its high-tech sector, which is vital to its economy, could be severely damaged if China takes action against Taiwan, which, in his opinion, is a matter of when, not if. Everything changed, though, when Israel invaded Gaza following the horrific attacks by Hamas on October 7. Chinese officials have been actively working to limit Israel's military response and have refused to denounce Hamas' terror rampage, demonstrating a distinctly hostile attitude toward the Jewish state in response to the crisis. At the same time, the immensely popular Chinese social media platform TikTok has been accused of aiding in the dissemination of pro-Hamas propaganda due to the abundance of pro-Palestinian content on the platform. The cumulative effect of these factors has been the increasing realization among Israelis that China is not a neutral actor in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict but rather has taken a firm stance on one side or the other and is actively contributing to anti-Semitism. Israeli perceptions of Russia have also undergone a dramatic change. Israel had remained mostly silent in response to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine until this past autumn, when it finally voiced its support for Kiev's resistance to Moscow's aggression. This moderate position was warranted in more than one way. Because Russia is so prominent on Israel's northern border and continues to back the regime of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad, Israeli lawmakers in Jerusalem warned that the Jewish state should exercise caution lest it anger the Kremlin. Also important were the approximately 15% of Israelis with Russian ancestry, many of whom maintain ties to the old country. Many also pointed out that, while Putin may not have been openly pro-Israel, he was certainly the least anti-Semitic Russian president in recent memory. All things considered, the end result was a narrowly focused policy toward Ukraine. Despite Jerusalem's generous humanitarian aid and intelligence offerings to Kiev, it refrained from providing military aid or material. Israeli strategy remained largely unaffected by Iran's, Israel's regional enemy, decision to join the war on Russia's side, but since October 7, Russia's policies have changed everything. Instead of denouncing Hamas' terrorist campaign, Moscow has remained mostly silent. In an attempt to show its continued influence in the Middle East, it has also formally received representatives of the terrorist group. Despite the apparent personal ties between Putin and Netanyahu, Russia has done little to support Israel's government. This has created the lasting impression that Russia, similar to the Soviet Union before it, is hostile toward Jews. In Israeli society, that realization is starting to seep in. More and more Israelis are coming around to the idea that Israel might have bungled its policy toward Ukraine and that a stronger defense of Kiev is necessary, both online and in casual conversations. Fundamental to this insight is the fact that the struggle for freedom is a global one, and that restrictions imposed in one region increase the likelihood of violent uprisings in other regions. That is to say, the tragedies of October 7 marked a turning point for Israel, and it will surely lead to a significant reorganization of its foreign policy. The exact nature of this change is still up in the air, but early indicators indicate that Jerusalem's relationships with Beijing and Moscow are about to undergo a dramatic shift.